Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I know we're still having incoming visitors, so just let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Kees Lemmens. I'm a digital advisor with Microsoft, specifically in Asia Pacific, and I focus on the finance industry, so banking and insurance in particular. Today, I want to talk with you about what it is to become the bank of the future, but really in a very realistic manner, in a manner that we all can ultimately achieve. I will take you on a journey to understanding our approach to digital transformation, why it matters to you, and then how we have applied this with one of our particular customers. I will also talk to you a little bit about the history of this thought of the bank of the future. When we think about banking as an industry, for about 200 years now, we have been looking at banks and they have been looking at our customers to a rear-view mirror. An intelligent bank, that's what's the bank of the future, is about predicting what customers want next and being able to act on these predictions to agility and flexibility. And that's really what I want to talk about with you today. That as an outcome is really about generating profitability, making sure that no matter what, you as a bank survive, and that's what profitability drives. Most of us will probably agree that we all understand money and that profitability is really important. So, from that look, okay, those who are not willing to move forward or who are hesitant stand to lose about 35% of their profit margin over the coming 2 to 3 years. Meanwhile, those who are taking action and who are the fast followers stand to gain about 40% of profitability. That's huge. That makes a big difference, especially when we consider that in a time span of about 10 years, half of the companies are no longer around. So, digital transformation is really important to your survival. And the way we look at digital transformation is slightly different from other definitions out there. Digital is about the modern technologies that enable you and empower your organization, from employees to customers. Transformation, on the other hand, is about creating innovative and continuously learning cultures. This is really, really important because ultimately that helps you drive your organization forward. Culture is the hardest thing to do and to change. In fact, we all love change, except we don't. We are mostly change resistant. So I'm looking at all of you as the change enablers who are going to take the first steps to be the advocates within your companies. And that's really important to take that into mind, okay? When we talk about modern technologies, we generally within Microsoft like to talk about our intelligent cloud, our Azure platform. Azure is nothing more than a very simple means to empower your business, save money, and make sure that ultimately you can do the things that you want to do. It is also about bringing in a very deep level of personalization. So we have moved in the banking industry from massive segments to smaller segments, now to micro segments, and we're moving now to segments of one. This level of personalization of your solutions and your products for your customer is fundamentally important to how you interact with them and how you make sense of their lives. And I will come back to this in a moment. It is also about reinventing the way you ultimately do and handle your business, your operations, making sure that you become more productive and more agile at the same time. Within Microsoft, we have 4 pillars. We call these the digital strategic pillars, on which we build our digital strategies. From customer engagement, to empowering employees, to optimization of operations, to fundamentally changing the organization and transforming the way you do business. Let me give you a bit of a different look on that. Ultimately, when you want to create a digital strategy, you will need to make choices. On the one hand of the spectrum, you can focus on creating best-in-class customer experience, really deep, engaging conversations, and making sure that ultimately you empower your customer. On the other hand of the spectrum, we have business model transformation, which really is rethinking the fundamental model of banking. For the longest time, banking has always been about getting deposits and loaning out that money. That's fundamentally a business model of a bank. For insurance companies, it's getting in enough money to fund the insurance products that we have and issue these insurance products to our customers. Again, very, very basic in nature. To change these models and to become more of a platform, you will need to think about business model transformation. It's a choice of focus. It's not mutually exclusive, but the choice you make is going to be very, very important. And I want to urge something. When you think about that choice, you will have to take a step back. Digital transformation is about culture, right? So the culture needs to enable that choice. If you have a very traditional culture, doing business transformation fundamentally across the board is going to be a very, very hard change to start with. So you may want to focus more on customer experience change. On the other hand, if you're a really innovative company, you're lean, you're already agile, it's a lot easier to do that. So you see a lot of the fintechs operate within the business model change, and you see a lot of us as the traditional players operate within the customer experience change. We also see that the supporting pillars, empowering your employees and optimizing your operations, are supporting these strategic choices. That said, the level of dependency on these 2 pillars is dependent on where you focus. You want to focus more on empowering your front end and your back end employees when you're focusing on a customer experience model. On the other hand, you want to optimize your operations and automate as much as possible when you focus on a business transformational model. So these are the key concepts just to keep in mind when we talk about digital transformation in detail. In order for us to help you realize your digital ambitions, your dreams, we have a very simple approach. We have done this approach with thousands of our customers across the globe, and we have tuned it together with them. We have learned from them, and we have improved it. It's about dream, design, deliver. Dreaming is about creating really bold visionary ideas that will take you into a segment of yourself that's separate from anywhere else that anybody else is playing. It puts you in a position where you are in a niche. Design is about making these ideas real, making them tangible, so you can actually understand what's the value you get from these ideas, as well as how are they going to really help our business become more successful. Delivery is about measuring that value, making sure that we are learning from the mistakes that we make, and making sure that we are deriving the right outcomes for our business. And I get to this in a bit more detail with you. We take you normally on what we call journey to value. And we start with bringing industry trends from your industry, from industries that are sub-industries within your industry, and from other industries that are relevant to the way you will do business because of the expectations that they have set with your customers. We also bring in customer research. We will actually go out, talk to your customers, really trying to understand who they are, what they are thinking, what they're feeling, and what they're doing when they are engaging with you. This helps us create the initial customer journeys. We also bring in the understanding of your business strategy, because ultimately that's what drives the digital motivation. Without a clear understanding of your business strategy, we cannot really produce an effective digital strategy. They need to be linked, and they need to be driven by the business. It is not IT driven. I want to be really, really clear on this. So when we do this dreaming, what does that really mean in baby steps? First, we help you create a very bold vision. A vision that inspires, and a vision that is out enough to last for a couple of years. Something that will help you communicate your change. And that's not like, we're going to change today and tomorrow we'll see. It needs to be a gradual process, well thought out. Change is really hard, and we have seen this over and over again, so that's why I'm emphasizing on this. We also create what we call initial customer journeys. And these are input for our envisioning workshops. These journeys outline who is the persona, which is really an archetype of the segment that we are representing. The narrower you define your segments, the better it is. Because the more accurate that persona will be able to reflect that specific segment. Personally, I like to focus on the segments that drive your biggest profitability. And I'll come back to that in about a minute. The other thing that we do is assessing the maturity of your digital organization capabilities. We need to know where you are in order for us to determine what is the gap between. And it is that gap between that helps us fill in with you, co-creating the value case. The value case is not a business case. It's the potential value that we can derive from solving the problems that you have identified within the customer journey and the ideas that spun off of that during the workshop. When we have these, we then start plotting them onto a grid. This priority grid has 3 key dimensions. The first one is uncertainty. As I said, change is hard. Change brings uncertainty. The second one is the value it generates. The more valuable, the bigger the business impact for you. And the third one is the time it takes for these ideas to be realized. Therefore, you will be able to create what we call micro-revolutions. And these micro-revolutions are really enablers of change. The first ones you pick should be big enough in terms of business monetary impact to fund the next set, or even a really, really big part of your digital strategy / roadmap. We call that self-funding roadmaps. And we have seen this work over and over again. And the prioritization of ideas is therefore really, really important to be done well and to be done with a consensus. We also create, for those ideas that have been selected, together with you, storyboards. And storyboards are split into 2 parts. First is really a definition of what is this idea in the form of a solution, and able to design. So you understand via visual aid what that solution really should be like. Everybody is on the same page because visual is something we all understand. It is underpinned by the technical storyboard that basically outlines high level what are the building blocks necessary to make that solution a reality. That then goes into the pilot definitions. The pilot definitions are these micro-revolutions that I was talking about, the first set. And it's really, really important to have a very clear grasp on what they are going to be, because they are going to be the ones that launch first. Understanding them in more detail than the rest of the roadmap is fundamental to your success. Ultimately, that drives the digital roadmap. The digital roadmap is really your digital strategy as to what you're going to be doing in the next 3-4 years. Some banks, some insurance companies, and some other financial institutions like to have shorter timelines. They focus on 1-2 year timelines. And although I think for them that may be correct, it really is dependent again on that cultural element, their willingness to change. I have seen for most financial institutions, it takes a roadmap of 3 to 4 years to really help build it over time. I will give an example later on as to why that is. The next phase is about designing it, making it real. And this is where we have something that is really quite unique. It's something that none of our competitors do. We take you on a ride. And I don't mean, we take you on a Maserati or a Lamborghini. I mean, we take you on a rapid innovation, delivery, and execution mode. It's an iterative process where we work with you through the ideas in enough detail to really create tangible, workable prototypes. Call them minimal viable products in agile terms. These we built on our Azure platform. And they are not ready for production, okay? They are ready for internal showcasing. And this is really an important distinction. What we call production ready are minimal viable solutions. These are fully workable and fulfill the set of expectations of your customers to the largest extent that they need to be fulfilling them. Customers are expecting an experience that's integrated with their lives. And therefore, we need to produce solutions that are end-to-end relevant for their problem set. We put all of these requirements or ideas onto a product backlog. And from there on, we start planning what are the specific motions, what are the specific projects we have to go into to make them happen. That's basically the release plan. And then finally, we start building what we call this agile delivery model. And I just want to do a quick poll. Who's familiar with the term agile? Okay. So agile really means being able to effectively take in feedback and respond on that feedback. And that feedback is the feedback from the customer. The more time elapses between you gathering that feedback and acting on it, the less agile you are. That's the real simple definition of agile. So for us to take in that feedback on our prototypes, first from internally and then from real customers, and embedding in more and more intelligence into these products so we can get that feedback faster and faster and learn faster, is really important. Those who learn the fastest are going to be the most successful in the future. In order for us to really realize that, we will need to understand what's the adoption. Any solution, any product, any service you offer within the market, it needs to have a certain level of adoption. Without adoption, there is no usage. Without usage, there's no value. It's that simple. So we really are keen on measuring this. Value management is the next step where we are understanding what's the real tangible outcome, the monetary value from these solutions, products, and services that we are offering within the market. And then is the most important part, continuously improving them. Continuously improving doesn't mean that you are endlessly going through a motion to improve a product that doesn't work. If we come to the conclusion that a product doesn't have the results that we envisioned, we want to understand why that is. If we come to a conclusion that it is simply because there's no need in the market for such a product, we have been basically off course with our analysis, we need to pull that product. Most of the financial institutions I know don't pull the products. They keep them in market, and it costs a lot of money, it costs resources, and they don't have a tangible return. Waste. That's what we call it in agile terms. So we are very adamant on helping you maximize ultimately your business value. And that's what this process, this journey to value does. I want to highlight two more things. We do this on building a agile infrastructure. This is your full infrastructure transformation. And by infrastructure, I don't just mean moving you to cloud. I mean creating the necessary facilities to do, for example, continuous delivery, which means rolling out new products, new services, new solutions, real fast, real quick, fully automated. This is extremely powerful if it's done right, but it takes time to get there. The other thing that we help you do is create a target agile operating model. This is the way you as a business operate, not IT as a business. And I will explain this in more detail when I'm explaining the customer that I'm going to talk you through. Now, I promised you a glimpse of the future. But really what I want to talk about is not so much a glimpse of the future as much as the expectation of today. Take Des. Des is a 26-year-old Korean girl who has just recently finished her studies and has taken up a nice position. Her banking app is part of her life. It's ingrained in her life. So I'll take you just a little bit through this journey to help you understand what that means, ingrained into someone's life, because this concept is really, really important. First, the app wakes her up. It tells her it's a sunny day, and it tells her it's a great day for shopping. Most girls like shopping, right? So that's my presumption here. And she orders a taxi, and basically that's all seamlessly paid, because the taxi knows, just like Uber, you know who she is, what she wants, where she wants to go. So she meets her friend for breakfast at this restaurant, and the bill comes in. Bill is paid for seamlessly with the app. And then she decides to go Dutch. By the way, I am Dutch, so this is a very typical example in my country. We like to split the bill. You pay half, I pay half. So she taps on done. Easy peasy. Her app is also her coach for staying healthy. This is a banking app I'm talking about. So the app suggests, hey, you know what, there's a bike stand nearby, grab a bike instead of taking a taxi again. And it tells you also how much you're saving, not just how much health benefits it has. So you see a tangible return that encourages you to save more. Then she meets up with a friend, and her friend wants to borrow some money. Now normally, that's not a big deal. We are happy to pay our friends some money and see if we get a return on that or not. But generally speaking, how often does it happen that we lend our friends some money and they don't pay back on time or they don't pay back at all? It does happen. So the app actually has built-in a credit scoring for her friend and lets her know, based on the records and the information that we have from many, many different sources, what her friend's credit score is, specifically applicable for the loan that she's asking. And it issues an agreement between the two, because they're using the same app. She gets thirsty, and basically she moves on and pays by other technology. She grabs a snack from the vending machine, pays by QR code. All of these are integrated technologies, but the technologies aren't important. It's all there. We can pay by face, we can pay by voice. It doesn't matter anymore. The story of the moral, or the morale of the story, is the last point. This is what a customer is expecting today. And I want to pause on that for a moment. These expectations are created not by us as financial services providers. They are expectations that are created by Airbnb, by Uber, by these modern technology platforms that allow our customers' expectations to go beyond what they were. Word of mouth is going to be the most fundamental driver for adoption in the future. That means you need to be able to be very good at social marketing. You need to be able to be very good at integrating your application into their lives and make it so valuable to their life that they are using it on a day-to-day basis. That way you stay relevant. Without doing that, you'll be very, very quick to be dismissed as just a bank or as just an insurance company. You add no real value to their life. Nobody likes to work with their bank. Nobody likes to work on an insurance product to buy it. But when it becomes part, integral of their life, and it is seamless, all of a sudden that expectation starts to shift and change. So that's what this journey is trying to visualize for you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about my Dutch origins. When I was in the Netherlands, I was working with a bank as one of my clients, ING. Who here knows ING Group? Okay, a few hands. Good, good. I'm glad to know that. So I'll give you a bit more context to it. ING is a bank that has 52,000 employees, has a balance sheet of 846 billion euros. It has revenues somewhere of 17.5 billion. So it's a big bank. In the Netherlands, we just have 16 million people. So it does business across borders. It's an international bank. And they have gone through a really remarkable story. And just to see if you're all awake here, they're actually no longer a bank. They are the world's largest fintech. Everybody's familiar with the word fintech, right? Okay, so from bank to fintech, what does that mean and how do you do that? That's what I'm going to try to talk to you about. Their CEO, Rolf Harmes, is really a key visionary. He understood very early that banks are no longer banks, but are in fact technology companies. And he took that vision. And in 2010, when they had basically a whole new management team come in after the bailout that they needed in 2008 for the financial crisis situation, they started with a blank slate. They had a new team, but they still had all of the legacy in place. Legacy in terms of systems, in terms of processes, in terms of what people were thinking, and in terms of really everything else as well. They treated, IT treated their customer, the business, as such, and therefore they had SLAs. Their IT landscape was so complex that nobody really knew who to call to fix anything. Sounds familiar? I'm sure some of you face this reality today. I hope not, but that's what they refer to as the dark side of the moon. In fact, when Ron van Kemenade is the CIO of ING, and he's a good friend of mine. So when he joined the company, this architect came to him and he's like, "Hey Ron, welcome aboard. Great meeting you. Welcome to the dark side of the moon." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, you'll experience that by yourself, don't worry." 3 months into the journey, Ron was willing to give up. He hadn't seen any such a mess before. He had been with a large telco operator in the Netherlands, and then when he shifted to ING, that world just changed, fundamentally. But he didn't give up. In fact, he went out and he searched for inspiration. So he went to a developer's day, something similar to Microsoft Ignite. And I like the fact that we call it Ignite because it's really supposed to be a spark, something that starts inspiring you. And that is what exactly he did. So he took a few of his key team members that he had selected, and they went to this developer day. And what he saw there was a group of people that were all very passionate, deeply passionate about technology, about helping others benefit from these technologies. So he looked in the rearview mirror of him, and he's like, "Well, that's not where we are, but this is where I want to go with my team." So he wanted to create an engineering culture within ING. And this is a very important realization, because that meant basically taking ING onto the journey from bank towards technology company. But you know, most of us bankers, we don't necessarily like to talk even to IT, let alone become an IT person, right? So there is a lot of resistance to deal with. And that resistance was just one of the facts that they were facing. The other fact that they were facing was their mobile app was rated just 1 star. And the only reason it was rated 1 star is because people couldn't vote any lower than that. It was probably the most horrible banking app I've ever seen. And a lot of people agreed with that. So when 2 of his team members walked into his office and started talking about, we need to do things in a different way. We need to start leveraging Scrum methodology. We need to start thinking about how we can develop at least our mobile app in a more agile way. We need to think about what type of technology we need in order to make that happen. And we want to experiment. They gave him an hour briefing. And anybody who knows him, he doesn't give normally people an hour of his time. He is very interruptive. He is very much like disrupting the presentation, and you get a lot of questions. It's great. So people were a little bit, he hasn't said anything for an hour. They were not sure what to think. And then he said to them, you know what, guys, I probably didn't understand half of what you were saying, but it sounds really like a good idea to do. So let's do it. Let's start this. And he did a couple of things with his team that are really, really important. The first thing that they did was creating this culture of change from the beginning on. So they're starting to do basically a guerrilla campaign within the bank, hanging posters that really inspired people to start thinking differently on places where people were talking a lot about doing stuff but never did anything. They were positioning these 2 Scrum teams that they started with, what he got his permission from the management team for, in the middle of the building. Now, ING building headquarters is a big shoe, basically. So the middle of the building sees a lot of foot traffic, especially because it's the cafeteria. Within the cafeteria, they built this circular office, fully glass. You could not avoid this team. You had to go eat because there's nothing else there. So everybody saw this team. And it created a lot of visibility. They saw that this team was having fun. The way of working was different. They saw that this team generated a lot of positive, what I call fire. And that's a really, really important thing when you're wanting to change. Because that positive energy and celebrating these little successes is key to how you ultimately go on. Now, while doing so, they run into a really, really big problem. Doing the Scrum methodology means every 2 or 4 weeks, whatever your motion is, you need to prototype basically and show that prototype back to the business. And in the beginning, they did so on PowerPoint because that's their culture. So, sorry Microsoft, but bye-bye PowerPoint. No more. We want to see code. And that created some very awkward situations sometimes. When you show code to a marketing team, they were like, I'm sorry, I don't understand code. But when they started to see how that code progressed into real outcomes, they started to get the bigger picture. And they were able to give feedback that actually was valuable. And they started to work more closely together. And they started to see outcomes. But they were running into a big, big problem. This legacy infrastructure that they had was holding them back. They couldn't quickly enough publish things to production. So they needed to rethink, and again, they went for inspiration elsewhere, and they came to the conclusion that they needed to do something called continuous delivery, which is really a very important concept. And this is something you want to be able to do across your bank infrastructure, but not necessarily in the same frequency of motions. For mobile, it should be a week, maybe 2 weeks. But for your more mature business applications, you maybe want to do this in a month or 2-month cycles, because they don't need to change as often, and they don't necessarily need to change as much. But mobile, which is customer-facing, is a different story. Your branch may be a very different story very soon. So that's really important to consider. And I can talk about the technical details of this, but I won't. Then, in 2012, February 2012, their newest app was launched, and it went straight for 1 to 5 stars. And in fact, ever since, it's been a 5-star app. In fact, it's been the best app in the Netherlands ever since. It means that they beat Facebook, they beat Google, they beat... A banking app is #1 app in the Netherlands. That's quite impressive. And one of the things that they started to run into is that this high adoption of their app brought about new problems, growth pains. And one got a word thrown to his face, hey, you should move your stuff to cloud. And back in 2012, cloud was something that was sort of iffy and nobody really understood what cloud was, nor did he. So they were like, what do we do with cloud? And then basically the next topic that came up was DevOps. Well, in order to really leverage cloud and to be effective with your way of working, you need to break down the silos. Ah, okay, so how do I do that? Term came in, DevOps, bringing development and operations together rather than the developers coding, hope for the best, throw the code over the fence and see what happens in production. They never cared about non-functional requirements. Bringing them together meant they started to care. And cloud meant that the provisioning could be done in a way that was completely flexible. So these are fundamental movements to help them grow. But it wasn't enough, because backend systems are immense. They used mainframes with 40,000 somewhat applications on top of them. You can't lift and shift a mainframe to cloud. It just doesn't work. People may tell you different, forget it. You will need to think about how do you create a modular architecture that really helps you scale, provide reliability, provide the right security, and provide the right performance. This is fundamental to the backbone of how you do banking. And really they started to borrow the concept from Netflix, which is a massive content application with huge amounts of users and content. So when it comes to scale, when it comes to performance, and when it comes to security, they really got it right. And I know they are, unfortunately, an AWS customer, but we have very, very similar techniques. Understanding how to build a modular architecture requires probably your best talent and your best engineers. This is not a concept that you create within a couple of hours. This takes time and planning. It's a really, really difficult step to achieve. So I want to urge you to consider that when you are building your future plans. Doing this well pays off big time. Doing this wrong will cost you dearly. Okay, next. Next, they started to borrow a concept from Spotify. So Spotify is this music streaming application which is somewhat similar to Netflix. And they have been working in an agile way for a very long time. And they basically have been able to do so at scale successfully. Which is great, because normally we have all of these singular Scrum teams, and they went from 2 Scrum teams to 26 Scrum teams in just 6 months' time. So imagine how that has grown when they're now in 2015. They had a massive amount of Scrum teams, and they needed to start managing these different Scrum teams. And it was difficult because, well, they were supposed to be self-steering. So they borrowed the concept of Spotify as to how to bring them together. And they borrowed concepts like you need to organize them into squads. And squads have product owners. And a product owner needs to be somebody that is well-trained, really understands that role, and preferably has a P&L responsibility. It's not always someone from the business. When you have a squad that's, for example, security, you want somebody with deep security skills leading that squad, not somebody from the business. But when you have a squad that focuses on, for example, your mortgages, then you want someone definitely from the business. Data and AI, you want a data scientist leading that understands these things in detail. Then these squads need to be managed as well. So you put them together into what they call tribes. And that scales it all up. And a tribe has a tribe leader and it has a series of agile coaches. And these agile coaches help you really make sure that you work in the right way and you learn and you improve. Now, that's all very free structure. That's horizontal. But we are all used to hierarchical structures. So why is my hierarchy in this? Well, for that we have chapters. And chapters are really centered around expertise, understanding how we group people together with the same level of expertise. And this is really important because it helps you develop the full group. And from those that come in young, naive, and unskilled, bringing them up to expert level. That's what these chapters are designed to help for. So they borrowed that from Spotify. Now, is that the only agile model that works? Definitely not. There are many, many different models. And what's right for them doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. The one thing that is, however, really important is to experiment as much as possible with different models and different tools. I can't encourage you to do that enough. It's really important. Give people the freedom to experiment. Then they started to think, how do we cross the boundary from doing this within our IT organization and scaling this up to really allow our bank to become an agile bank, to basically have a business that operates in an agile way. And they brought a concept from Sapos, which is really about delivering happiness. Please read the book, it's a great book. And they started to apply agile to their call centers, to their branches, to their operations. They really built on it. And it became very, very effective because all of these feedback channels and these improvements that they did made it a great experience for the customers to bank with them. Next, they borrowed something to help build and scale this talent pool that they had acquired so far. So the driver's model is really about understanding the maturity of your talent that's observable. A great engineer isn't somebody who programs great code. A great engineer is somebody who can work in a team, functions well within the team, is willing to listen to feedback, and works together with others to create great outcomes. This model allows you to do that. And it's really, really important to have such a vision and have a talent management program around this to allow your organization to grow. One too far. So, after doing all of this, they accomplished to become a full DevOps, BizDevOps bank, an agile bank, which is great. I mean, can you imagine your bank transforming from a fully traditional bank all the way down to an agile bank? It's a big step, big leap forward. They did this very fast, actually. Given that at that time, they had to go through all of these steps without a playbook. We help you by bringing a playbook. We help you by actually having these insights that many of our customers have generated with us. Now, in 2016, they took this a step further. And they did something that's considered widely unpopular. They started to really automate jobs and leverage data and AI and robotic process automation to phase out 7,000 jobs out of the bank. That's about 15% of their employees. This is a hard choice because ultimately you'll need to have your reputational risk and you have your employee happiness and then you have your balance sheet. And they decided that it's worth the risk because of the enormous amount of cost and effectiveness for the customer that it saves. Not for them, for their customer. This is really, really important to understand. They don't do this for themselves. They did this for their customer. And the customers love it because when they apply for a mortgage, it takes less than 10 minutes all the way from filling out the first form to getting the approval. When they apply for a car loan, they can do this live at the dealership, and they have instant approval. When they apply for a new bank account, it takes less than 2 minutes, and they can do it anywhere where they want to. That's what this type of thing allows you to do. The result, they became world's best bank in 2017. And I think if we're looking back at, having a one-star app to becoming world's best bank, that's quite an achievement. The good thing that I really, really like is they like to share their knowledge. And similar to us, we like to share what we are learning on these journeys with our customers. We take, but we also give back to the communities. So Microsoft has been on this journey of transformation themselves. And one of the things that we are moving towards more and more to is embracing open source. And open source means giving back to the community, learning together with the community, and creating things with the community. And we do that with our customers as well. Think about, for example, Westpac, ANZ, but also customers that are less traditional in the banking world, such as a major retailer like Ahold, or a flight operator like KLM, or a school, business school in Seat. All of these companies are struggling with the same type of problems. And these type of problems is what we have experienced, and we can help them solve. And that's really important. Giving back and talking about problems together helps you come to new conclusions as well. So together we're on this learning journey, and actually that's a lot of fun. Now, before I talk about this slide, I just want to talk briefly about data. I'm sure that all of you are aware that data is an important aspect of your transformation journey. I would argue, next to culture, it's probably the most important aspect to pay attention to. Your data estate and making sure you plan properly for your data estate will help you build success. Failing to do so, failing to recognize the integration challenges, the data quality issues, data governance, will really, really harm your transformation. In order for you to be successful, you'll need to consider data. And what we see more and more and more is this exponential growth of data, which means it becomes harder and harder to really manage it. We see too many banks focusing on big data lakes. Oh, that's fantastic. It gives us so much information. But it doesn't give insight because it became unmanageable. You will need to take into account the use cases that you want to work on and then start planning accordingly. And that ties in with this story around culture. Microsoft is another company that knows it all. No more. We used to be, and I'm sorry to say this, we used to be relatively arrogant. But I think since Satya came in, and perhaps before that already a little bit, we started to change. And this change from a know-it-all to becoming a learn-it-all has been very, very important to the way we do business with you now. Myself, as a digital advisor, I love working with my customers because I am learning so much each and every day. And I'm happy to give back. It is this type of a culture that we're trying to establish within Microsoft. And we have been on this journey now for about 3 years. And we're progressing down this journey. We're definitely not there yet. There's a lot more to do. So culture is really, really important. As I said, it's hard. In fact, if I were to give you some last points, I would say culture is the hardest thing to change. When you step up as a leader to drive your transformation, you are going to experience people throwing rocks, not literally probably, but people are going to throw garbage at you. They are going to resist that change because that's not how we have done it. We have always done it this way. People love doing things in the same way because it's a routine. It's something that gives safety. It's something that gives security. You take that away when you start changing. And having this really big vision, this bold vision, behind it that you communicate over and over and over again is therefore really, really important, because it helps people see the bigger picture. The change needs to be bigger than the people. It needs to be something of a legacy that you want to leave behind. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish as well. So I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, by the way. Still good, good. So basically, with regard to these aspects of what you want to move on as a culture, you then can start thinking about your transformation. Okay, what will this bank, this new bank of me, be? Do I want to become a platform company where I'm integrating with all of these different ecosystems, where I am becoming invincible as well as invisible? Because when you become part of this larger ecosystem and you start to expand as a bank and you start to integrate yourself and insert yourself into the lives of these customers, you no longer need to be present as a bank. You are already there because you're relevant to their lives. DBS is one of these banks that got this pretty damn right. Their mission is to become an invisible bank. And they have been on a journey, as some of you have seen in the video that we presented earlier. But if you talk to their customers just a few years back, 5 years back, I was talking to this taxi driver when I was in Singapore. And the guy said to me when I talked about DBS, "Oh, bloody slow." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I can't even get my account opened." But now you can. Took them 5 years, what ING took a very long time. So we see that transformations are speeding up. And by speeding up, we are able to really help you accomplish these roadmaps of the 3-4 years that I was talking about earlier. So think about these aspects when you plan for your future, and that's where I will leave it today. Thank you.